Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Icinga for Windows 1.8 Q&A session for the upcoming release of Icinga for Windows. I hope you can hear me. I hope everything is fine. And today we are talking about the upcoming release for Icinga for Windows, for what has changed, what you need to keep in mind, and just to give everyone a summary on what's new, how to proceed, and also present everything with a live demonstration. So basically, who am I? My name is Christian. I'm working in the development and sales department, and I'm the responsible main developer for Icinga for Windows. And I'm happy to guide you through everything we have here today. Now, let's get started. We start with the first thing. Icinga for Windows is getting a new release, so basically we will update the framework, of course, because it's the source of everything we actually do. So, if you have any questions, please just go ahead, write them inside the chat, then I will respond to it and give you all the answers that are required for that. Now, what's new within the framework? We have around 26 bug fix commits right now. There are some additional ones coming for 1.8 next week. But what are the main goals? Or what was the main problems? We had a memory leak within the background service, handling the REST API and the service checks. So we fixed all of the remaining memory leaks there. We had a problem with the Icinga managed user, which caused in large Active Directories that the entire process installation will freeze for, let's say about half an hour, depending on the Active Directory size. That's fixed. Also, because it's also related, but also independently, we have lots of JEA related fixes. We did some performance tuning, code cleanup, so we got rid of old stuff that was no longer required, and also improved the usability in general and the outputs of certain entries and menus, and to give a better overview of what actually happened. And in addition, we reworked the entire background daemon itself. That's why the memory leak was also fixed, because we did an entire rework and made it a lot easier for new developers, for example, to integrate there. Now, we are always community driven. So basically, one user called Bips in our community ran some tests with Icinga for Windows, and basically what he did was he did testing before we implemented the aggressive garbage collection that we introduced with 1.7.0, and this CPU averaged at around 11% at a time, and memory was rising up to 5 GB. So that's quite a lot. Now, once we implemented the aggressive garbage collection, the CPU increased, but the memory got way down to 800 megabyte around, but it was still rising over time. And with the new background daemon, the entire new handling we have the CPU average around 1% below, or at 0% even sometimes, and the RAM went down to around 115 megabyte. So basically that's what also was evaluated internally, and we can confirm that these results are true, and thanks to Bips for testing and posting it. And here we are. That's the new background daemon handling. We are quite happy with it, and it improved performance a lot. It improved stability a lot, and I will come to it later, made things also a lot easier for developers. Now, Besides all the bug fixes, all the stuff that we improved there, we have also some new features. For example, starting with 1.8 Icinga for Windows, the PowerShell components will write everything they do inside a new event log called Icinga for Windows. So we will no longer add anything to the application log here. The Icinga agent itself will still log to the application log, but Icinga for Windows will no longer write log data to the application log. It's just the Icinga for Windows log. That's a new log entry that will be created. We have a new option in the Icinga management console, which now allows you to recreate certificates, to force the creation of certificates. So if you move, for example, let's say you have one Icinga master and the Icinga agent is connected to the master, and you move the host, the machine, to a different Icinga environment, for example, because you do a migration task, you had to deal with that yourself. Now you can simply force the recreation of the certificates, and that will allow you to move the agent to another Icinga environment quite easily. The REST API feature is now installed by default with all requirements. So basically, if you simply run the installer with the IMC, the REST API feature is enabled, as is the Icinga for Windows service, which boosts the performance by a lot. So that's why we believe it's ready to make this all standard and enable it by default. In addition, we added a command called repair Icinga service, and that one is basically required to ensure that if you update the agent, for example, it can sometimes happen that because of the service handling in Windows, the service only marked for deletion but not deleted already, which will make it hard for the Icinga agent to become installed again. So what this command will do is it will create the service again and ensure that it's back up running without you having to reinstall the agent, for example, because this process is much more easier to handle. We improved lots of the shell commands, so when you want to view your registered service checks or your background daemons and other things, the shell command now uses the new UI elements we created, so it's a better structured. You see all the arguments, for example, for the registered service checks and so on. So that's quite an improvement there. And what we also did is we actually added support for check by Icinga for Windows. That's a new plugin that will allow you from Linux systems to remotely check the Windows machines. It's a PowerShell written check command, so you will require to install the PowerShell on Linux. But basically that is natively supported now, so you can use to check simply or use JEA, for example. Both is supported. And we improved the menu structure of the IMC to be more user-friendly. Now, let's talk about the plugins. So basically what we did is for the plugins, we had one thing that was quite critical. So basically what we did was with 1.7, we renamed the use partition space plugin to partition space. And we created simply an alias to ensure that we do not break existing environments. Now the problem is that aliases do not work with 2012 R2, the Windows version. And as we did not create the alias within JEA, it was also working not in JEA context. That's now resolved because we created a custom command for this. So basically with 1.8, all these problems are now fixed and you can run both versions within JEA and on older Windows systems. In addition, the service check plugin did not fully support wildcards because it was causing an issue with the startup type and the current service state sometimes. And that's now fixed. So basically you can now fully use the wildcard handling, and then this will work as well. In addition, the certificate plugin is not including the cert store by default now. So if you want to monitor the cert store with check certificate, you can select the cert store, of course. By default, it's set to none. It's a new flag there, and you can simply check your local certificates then without having to include the cert store all the time, which not only improves performance, but also is for visual comparison a lot easier, because you don't have hundreds of certificates now in the output. In addition, we fixed some bugs with JEA itself within the plugins, which now supports the default JEA compiler without having to include script blocks or anything like that, because we just reworked all the plugins, so that will work now. And one interesting fix, we fixed the file encoding for the timesync plugin, which was not UTF-8. It was something very different, and that's why the JEA compiler skipped over it. Now that's fixed as well, and the timesync plugin is now also included in the JEA catalog and works now flawlessly there as well. And for features, what's new? We have new sorting options within the update plugin. So now you have categories like security updates, Microsoft Windows Defender updates, rollup updates, and everything else. And that helps a lot with monitoring security updates only or Windows Defender updates. You can flag every single argument there. We have a demo later on, so I can show you a little bit what's going on there. We have a new process monitoring plugin, which allows you to check the state of certain processes, how much memory they're using, how much CPU, how much threads, and so on. And we improved the directory plugin, which now collects an average of the file size, the largest file size, the smallest, and so on, to give a better idea on how the directory is actually behaving. Then we have the Hyper-V plugins, and we did some fixes there as well. So basically what we fixed was we had the issue that the overcommitment plugin always returned unknown in case the hypervisor was empty. So if there's no virtual machine there on the machine, then the plugin would return unknown. That's now fixed. It will simply return OK. We fixed an exception when multiple virtual machines were present with the same name as virtual machine. That caused an exception, which is now fixed. We switched to the internal ID for storing data internally. So basically now you can have 5 machines named CentOS 8 or whatever, and everything will work fine there. In addition, we fixed some exceptions that were caused by the Snapshot plugin, where you have no access to the snapshot location, which caused some sort of issues and exceptions. That's also now fixed, and you receive a proper error message now that you have no access to the space. And here also JEA fixes. What's new is that the Hyper-V Snapshot plugin allows you to override the status from unknown to OK, which means if no virtual machine is present on the machine, the Snapshot plugin will return unknown, because there is no real way to determine, are there no machines there, or is the service not running? Don't you have permissions to see it? So it's quite hard to get a good state of, is it just broken? Or are there really no virtual machines there? And now you can move the unknown to OK in that case. So that will, of course, also help a lot. And we added a new plugin, the Virtual Machine Manager. And that's something that's currently pending testing and hopefully will be released next week as well with 1.8.0. Now, the biggest thing is there are some additional steps required to migrate to 1.8.0. And the biggest one is that you will, if you're running the Icinga for Windows service, you will require a new service binary in version 1.2.0. That has already been released 2 weeks ago. So that's also available within the Icinga repositories. So you will have to update this binary in order for Icinga 1.8 to work properly because of the new event log feature we added, because we now have the Icinga for Windows log. That's also something that is required. So if you upgrade to 1.8, then the event log itself will be created. We have implemented migration tasks starting with 1.8. So for the current upgrade, if you upgrade from 1.7 or older to 1.8, you will have to trigger the migration task once manually, and that you simply do that by opening an Icinga shell or the management console or anything like that to load the actual framework. Then the migration tasks are applied, and then you're ready to go. Also, the event log is entirely migrated and cleaned up. And just in case, sometimes you require to reboot in order for the event log to properly log into the new event log. So what will happen is, if it doesn't work, everything is still logged within the application log, but the Icinga for Windows log is there. So that's something to keep in mind. If it doesn't work and the Icinga for Windows log is there, the migration tasks were executed, you simply have to reboot the system once, and then this is resolved as well. Now, for the developers, I said before we did some changes in the background daemon, and it also affects developers and makes things a lot easier. That's true. Right now, we have the following state within the background daemons. We have many global variables that store different aspects of certain things. Some of these global variables are already shared within the different threads are used there. And as developer, what you had to do was always sync the global Icinga daemon data variable with all your new threads. So also the developer guide and our module creator tools that we implemented with 1.7.0 always included this part that global Icinga daemon data is present as argument and had to be set. Now, that is no longer required, because we now have one global centralized variable called global Icinga. The variable is split into 3 different areas: private, public, and protected. And what happens is that you no longer have to manually share any of the variables there, because the public space is automatically set and made available for all new threads you create, which means all background daemons currently developed by users that are not Icinga related, so our stuff is updated already, but everything that you created is no longer compatible with 1.8.0, and you have to migrate from from global Icinga daemon data to global Icinga public. That's quite important. And then your daemons will work fine as well. You just need to replace all these calls if you made any of them, if you require anything of that. The object is a hash table, and the private space is quite simple. It's everything that's thread related to store data inside. So for example, if you have a function collecting data and you want to store the data for later calculation again or later usage, you can store it in a private space. It's not shared between any of the threads. It's just locally within the in this specific thread, and there are predefined members available, which are timers, scheduler, daemons, performance counter, and the progress status, which is just predefined because we have certain things that the threads will use, for example, like performance counters if you want to execute plugins, or the scheduler to store all the plugin result data inside. So these are already set and shouldn't be used as writer, but you can of course read data from them. For the daemons part, that's the exception. So if you create your own daemon, let's say custom daemon, then you can add all the data within the daemon space, for example. So that's basically the shared space for you to add your namespace. Then we have the public space, and the public space is the one that's the interesting part, because this one is automatically shared between all threads you have available within your Icinga for Windows environment. That means all data you write there is available from all threads, can be shared, can be read, can be written. There are some predefined statements like thread pools, daemons, and threads. Just like private, the daemons part is for your custom daemon for your namespace to add something there to share information. And to give an example, if you have the REST API and the service check daemon for metrics over time installed, then the metrics over time daemon will collect all the data in 1-3-5 minute average, for example. And if you execute a plugin over the REST API and you have, let's say, a CPU check that is collecting metrics over time, the REST daemon will now grab the metrics over time directly from the memory, from the service check daemon, and no longer from disk, which also boosts the performance a lot, because we have no conversion to do or read files or whatsoever, because it's just there. And last but not least, we have the protected space, and that's Icinga for Windows specific, which should never be touched by any developer or user. It's just for us to store data there, like JEA context, if it's running minimal space, if it's a daemon, or if we are in debug mode. So basically, that's the goal of all of that. Now, we also did some general changes for that. I didn't update the header here. So the Icinga command is no longer opening the Icinga shell. Previously, if you had a PowerShell open and typed Icinga, it will open the Icinga shell. Now it will simply open the Icinga management console. That's because of usability, because most of our users, we believe, want to simply configure something. You don't want to remember any of the commands we provide. So what we did is we changed the behavior. If you want to open the Icinga shell, you can do Icinga -shell. Then it will open the Icinga shell. But also on the first menu entry of the IMC, there is a menu point Icinga shell, so you can start the shell from the IMC. So basically, it's just a small adjustment, but we believe it helps our users a lot. If you do code testing, code development, for example, you can still run Icinga bracket, command bracket, and execute your code from there. That's still possible, and I will show that within the demo. In addition, JEA is now fully supported and even supported in the background daemons themselves. So that means there is no reason to not use JEA. We did lots of bug fixing, lots of improvements there, and JEA is now fully ready for production, in our opinion. So if you want to give it a try, test it. We would be happy to have your feedback there. We did some changes in the JEA profile compiler. So basically, all background daemons, all the dependencies there are added, the commands are added. So even in background daemon states, it's now working properly, and I can show it in a demo as well. And one minor change is that you can now update from snapshots. So the update Icinga command supported snapshots already, but it wasn't working. So we did some improvements there. We updated repositories. So now you can do the snapshot updates from there. What's important, there is no proper rollback support. So you should never switch from snapshot back to stable. So for example, if you install the snapshot for 1.8.0 and you do the migration tasks, of course you have the new event log handling and everything, and switching back to stable will cause problems there. So keep that in mind, use it with caution, because you could end up with certain problems there. But upgrading from Snapshot to the next stable, for example, so installing the Snapshot for 1.8.0 and then the stable release for 1.8.0, that's still fine. And now let's have a look on the demo on certain tasks. So basically, if we go now in our Icinga shell, we have right now 1.7.1 installed. So what we can do now is update Icinga, for example. We want to update the framework from Snapshot, and we'll receive a message now that the Snapshot packages are not installed or that nothing was found. So what we can do is, with a simple command or by using Icinga manage, we can update everything. So we go to for manage. Remember this menu structure because I will show later on the new version of that. We go to Icinga PowerShell framework because it's a framework related thing. Then we switch to Icinga repositories and we set a snapshot repository. We have that here, that's predefined. We hit enter. Now it's installed. And then we can update to the new framework version from the Snapshot branch. Now it's doing some updates, installing everything, so we are fine in that case. And if I run Icinga now, because we are now on 1.8.0, if I use now Icinga, I will upgrade the pending migration tasks. However, the migration tasks are stopping because we are not running the latest version of the Icinga for Windows service binary. So the migration tasks, the event log handling, everything related will not apply unless you update the service binary to ensure that at least some sort of things are working here and we do not break anything. So now we are in the state it's somehow working, but not really. And we can simply run the update Icinga service command or simply type in Icinga manage. Then we say update components. And then we see here we have the service, we hit 3, type yes, we want to install it, and now it will update the service binary. And the cool thing about the management console is you don't have to remember all the commands required for that. So now that's done, we open a new Icinga shell, and now the pending migrations will apply. It will restart the service to ensure that everything is working properly, that the service is also logging into the new environments, and that these topics are handled properly. Now what I want to do is I can do it later. So basically, now we're in a ready state. We have installed 1.8, we have updated the service, and if we go to our event log now, then we will have a new event log here. It's a bit small, which is called Icinga for Windows. And as you can see, the service is now already writing log data into the new Icinga for Windows event log. So that's quite cool. You no longer have to check the application log for that. You can simply use that one. And of course, the Icinga for Windows log is also updated for that. So all the commandlets required or able to read from the event log are already updated and working. Now that's basically the current state, the current state of the master. Now I want to show you the new menu structure of the management console. For that, that's an interesting feature that we added on packages Icinga.com or a guide, but it's barely known. So basically what you can do with the repositories, you can add snapshot repositories for certain branches on GitHub. So we have the project Icinga PowerShell Framework. We have the branch for the specific snapshot. We can add this repository. Everything on that is on packages Icinga.com. If you scroll down a little bit on the Icinga for Windows page, you will see it there. And we simply added this repository now to our snapshot. And now we can install the framework from this branch. And we do so. Then we are ready. And what now happens, if I type in Icinga, I will no longer receive the Icinga shell, but it will load the Icinga management console. Now, if you have type in 4, for example, then we directly enter the Icinga shell and can work from there. And if we, of course, type in Icinga again, then we are back within our management console. And as you can see, there are quite some changes here. So the entire menu was restructured to be more user-friendly, to do no longer require to know what is an agent, what is the framework. So you simply have many things basically there. So one important change is, I want to go on that very quickly, is when you hit base installation, everything here is as it was before, but there is a new possibility. You can now set a custom host name. So if none of the above names is actually the one you require, you can hit 6, set a custom host name. Then we can simply, I'm not running the installer right now, I just want to give a short overview here. And now we have in our overview the host name. It's a custom host name, and with the name Icinga, Icinga for Windows 1.8.0 preview. That's now the host name if we would want to go with that. So that also works within the Icinga Director Self-Service API context. If we, for example, have a look on the installation command, you will now also see that you can set it directly for the unintended installation. And the option for that is hostname 6. So if you use option 6, you can specify a custom name, and this will help a lot in many environments where, for example, you have a domain or a local DNS look or DNS lookup that's different from the global domain you want to use in your Icinga environment. So that's now fully supported. We have updated the component manager, so basically is that everything that's required for installation, update and removal is now handled within the component manager. We can do install, for example, and install new components directly from there. So if, for example, we want to install the MS SQL plugins, we can do so right here, as we could before. That handling is not different at all. But what's different now is you can install from Snapshot. And that's a bug. Okay. So basically you could update from the Snapshot if this bug wasn't there. That's great. good that I tested that before. So let's have a note. I can fix that later on. So basically, it's in theory, it's possible that we upgrade from Snapshot here. Or install from update. I think the update part is also not working. Oh, that one is working. So you can update the plugins, for example, directly to Snapshot. We do so right now. We install the plugins from the Snapshot. So that's quite cool. So you no longer have to know all the commands for that. Of course, you can show the commands, what's happening, what's done here, with the L option. But of course, you can simply run the update from here or run update entire environment, and then everything will be updated from to the latest snapshot. If we, for example, update the agent now, I hope I can reproduce the issue I want. Let me have a look if that works. I'm not sure if I can reproduce the error or the problem you can run into sometimes. I hope we do. Yeah, we do. Great. So, as you can see, we have received an error. Now, with the new management console, every single warning and error you receive during any of the command procedures you're doing is printed here right away. So if the installation fails, if certain actions fail whatsoever, they are listed here. So you no longer have to, what was the error I was receiving? You have to enable debug mode and everything related. You have it properly here. Now, that's the problem I was talking about. We updated the agent and we have, well, the service bus marked for deletion. That's a problem because right now, if I close the PowerShell, or if you have a look here at the, let's open a different shell, get service Icinga 2. There's no service with this name available. If we have a look on the service page here, there is no service Icinga 2 available. But the problem is the agent was successfully installed, but the service is not present. And that's something I can show you on how we can fix that now with the new command. But here, as you can see, updates from Snapshot working quite fine. And last but not least, remove components. You can now uninstall all components being installed, so everything component-wise, including agent, with all binary data and program data files whatsoever is removed, or you can uninstall the entire Icinga for Windows environment by simply running an option here. Now, if we go to overview it first, I opened the management console. That's not what I wanted. Simply Icinga. I need to get used to that myself. Overview I wanted. So what we did here is we added some additional details. So at first, at the very bottom, you see now which versions of the components are installed. They're ordered by name now, so it's much more easier if you're at the bottom to see, okay, what's actually installed. We can move ahead. We see all the repositories installed. We see that we have the service check daemon, for example, configured. We see list of configured service checks with a link to the installation guide for collect metrics over time. We see, for example, that the RP check forwarder feature is not enabled, the debug mode is not enabled, we have no JEA context or session file. There is still one thing pending because we want to add the service PID and JEA PID directly here. And so basically we have lots of details within this menu now, which we will in some point during this year, we will make this view mandatory for opening GitHub issues, because it will help us a lot to get a better overview of how the system is configured, to get a better understanding on how to give support. Now, if we move to settings, before we had the configuration part and then we had to choose between the Icinga agent and the PowerShell framework. Now the menu is much more structured because we have services, for example. If we click here, we see now the Icinga agent service is not installed and the Icinga for Windows service is running. We see all the Icinga agent services tasks are grayed out. If I want to start the agent, it tells me the agent is either not installed or the service is already running. The line break is not working here for some reason. And what we can do now is we have an option here, repair Icinga agent service. Now, if we press L, we see repair Icinga service, that's the command. And if we hit now 3, it will repair the service. Now the service is stopped and now we can simply start it with 0. So that's it. If you have the problem that the service daemon is causing some problems or during the upgrade that the service is no longer available, that's a quite easy fix and workaround for that. Of course, we have to resolve the issue underlining that problem, but that's for now a very good workaround to keep everything working properly. Now we have the Icinga agent features. That's the same as before. You can enable or disable certain features within the Icinga agent. Everything is listed here. You can enable or disable it with simple entries. We have the background daemons, for example, here as well. So that's yeah, just as before. We can manage the Icinga repositories as before, but it's much more accessible for new users or general for the configuration because everything is in one place now. We have a new entry logs, and basically what's the point of this is you can open the Icinga agent log files, you can open the Icinga for Windows log files quite easily. And it's all in one menu now. We can open the Icinga for Windows event log. And there's also a filter for the debug event log. So it will only print debug messages, for example, if we have any. Then we have the Icinga for Windows features, and here we have the API check feature, debug mode, and experimental. Experimental is simply overview of what we are going to do. If you want to, you can test them. Right now we have nothing, and we have the API check forwarder. Now, the biggest advantage now is with the new version that before you had always to add commands to the service check daemon. You had to enable the daemon, then you had to enable the feature and so on. That's all done within this command now. So if you enable it, then the REST daemon will be enabled. The check commands will be whitelisted. So basically, that's it. That's the very easy solution for that. And now we can, even if we go to the administrator plane, I think we need to restart the service now. I think that's one thing that's missing. Services. Let's restart the Icinga for Windows service. And if everything went as planned, no. Let's have a look if this works. Okay, no secure SSL, that's fine. Icinga untrusted, certificate validation enabled. And here we are. And we enable the REST API. It's just one configuration flag within the IMC. You hit it, and then it just works. And for the installation part, that's also done by default now. So that's enabled by default. Now, For troubleshooting, we have certain things here. We can update the Icinga for Windows cache. We can flush the Icinga API agent directory. We can also allow untrusted certificate communication. That's basically a requirement if you have self-signed certificates for your Icinga director, for example, and the communication is not possible because of SSL errors. You can directly enable this within this PowerShell session to ensure that you can execute your installation automation. And now we talk about JEA. And also here we did some improvements because JEA is now, like I said, working out of the box. Also the progress bar is no longer glitching the entire view. And if we install update a JEA profile now without the managed user, then we now, or before, we received the same error, but we couldn't see it. And now, like I said before, the errors are printed directly within the console output, including all the warnings, which means that's very much helpful. Now we can install the JEA profile with the managed user Icinga. If we simply hit that, then it will now create the user Icinga. It will update all the service users to handle this. As you can see, the plugins now simply just work. There is no error remaining with script blocks. We have our progress bar, for example, it's running through, compiling all the JEA catalog, all the JEA information. And once this is done, the JEA profile will be registered, the service team will be installed, and as you can see, also the warnings in this case for the JEA profile, they are listed here, that these two plugins use add type definitions, so you should have a look on that. Now what I will do, I will install the Icinga for Windows certificate. That might be quite interesting. So if we do that, then we are ready. And if I now hit services and restart Icinga for Windows service, I hopefully can still execute that one. Now here we are. And the good thing is everything is now running fully in JEA context. And if I, of course, I can now use the checker argument command. I'm not sure if you can see that. I can make it a little bigger. CPU. And now we get our CPU check. And everything is executed now directly within the JEA context. So yeah, that's just it. Quite interesting, quite straightforward. The certificate installation is something that will be done directly within the JEA context. Then if the REST API is enabled, that's something that's right now still missing. That will be improved, so you no longer have to install the Icinga for Windows certificate, which is required within the JEA context to ensure that the daemon will load. But yeah, that's it so far. That's Icinga for Windows 1.8.0. Now, if we want to execute plugins, invoke Icinga check updates, we can have a look on them. So, for example, we have now other updates, cumulative updates. We have a security update for Microsoft Server operating systems pending. You can add thresholds for all these. So if we want warning security, let's say 0, then you can now receive a warning. if more than one or more than 0 security updates are pending. Now that's an option. We added a process plugin. I'm not sure. Let's have a look. What process would make sense? Let's have a look on the Icinga 2 process. Let's add verbosity 3 so we get everything. And we see here, for example, the memory usage of each single Icinga 2 instance it's running. So 2 services are running. That's basically the memory usage. And the total usage is also added to this topic. And basically the good part about this is that we now have the possibility to add monitoring for each single process, but also the total process. So if I want memory warning is for each individual service. So let's say we want 15 MIP. And then we take the total memory warning and say 20 MIP. And now we get a warning that one of the Icinga 2 processes is using more memory than we provided, and the total is also increasing. So you can individually test processes, but also the total usage of every single process group with the same name, which is quite interesting, I think, and it helps a lot to determine if a certain application is going rogue here. For the CPU part, this one can on multi-core systems easily exceed 100%, which means if you have, let's say, 8 cores and your application is using 3 cores entirely, then this will be 300% CPU usage. It's just because Windows users are more used to percentage values than anything else, so that will be then 300%, which determines that 3 CPU cores in general are fully utilized. And last but not least, we have invoke Icinga check directory. Let's see, users administrator. Let's add verbosity 3. And for example, we now get the output folder count, total size, largest file, smallest file. We can add a recurse flag. And now we see, for example, the average file size is 571 bytes. The smallest file is 0 bytes, and the largest one is 975 bytes. So, yeah. For example, for backup folders, snapshot folders, you can now use this plugin much more easily to determine are there any large files. There is everything the same file size, so you have lots or many more possibilities in that case to actually check the directory and the files inside. Now, I'm not sure if there are any questions. If you have one, simply share them, write them in the chat, then we can have a discussion about this, because my topic itself or my part would be done so far. That's Icinga for Windows 1.8.0. There are some smaller things we are still working on, but that's the current state, and with all small fine-tuning resolved, we will release it next Tuesday. February 8th will be the release date of Icinga for Windows 1.8. Now, if you have questions, you can of course ask them. I will be happy to show them or discuss them with you. And if not, if there's nothing remaining here, then yeah, I appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you a lot. I hope every one of you will install Icinga for Windows 1.8.0, give us feedback, and of course, if you have plugin ideas, if you have developed something, you can provide pull requests, open own repositories on GitHub, or simply share your opinion thoughts. We would be happy to discuss them with you, to include them in the project, because without a user base, Icinga for Windows is just another tool in the white space of the internet. And as there are no questions or topics to discuss, then yeah. Here. We use the Linux version of Icinga, but very interested in the Windows version. That's I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, so Icinga for Windows is especially designed for the Windows monitoring part, and hopefully everything is covered by your needs. And if not, simply open a feature request if there's some plugins missing. Then yeah, sure, we can add everything if it's possible from a development point to achieve the goals. Thank you for the video. Thank you for your time. And yeah, if there's anything else, reach out to us on Twitter, on Facebook. Write us an email if you want to. If you have some additional feedback you don't want to discuss online live, or join us on GitHub. And yeah, thank you very much, and have a